Welcome back to Declassified Diagnosis. Today we're discussing the world's most famous soda and the hard drugs that used to be inside it.
And that's the thing, right? Most people treat this as a joke. Haha, Coke had cocaine. But the real story is a tragedy.
It's so much darker than a fun fact.
So much darker. It involves a Civil War soldier bleeding out in the dirt, a crippling morphine addiction, and a desperate attempt to find a cure that accidentally created a billion-dollar empire.
That is a heavy setup. Before we open this file, if you enjoy these daily deep dives into dark history, please hit that subscribe button and share this with a friend who drinks way too much soda. It really helps us grow.
It really does.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're not just talking about a soft drink. It's an American institution.
Yeah.
A piece of global iconography that's on pretty much every shelf in the world.
Exactly. But the history of Coca-Cola isn't some simple story about marketing and sugar water. It's a story that's deeply rooted in pain, in desperation.
In a medical tragedy, as you said.
A medical tragedy that just by pure chance sparked this massive empire. And for most people, the whole cocaine thing is just, funny trivia, a little factoid you drop at a party.
Right, to get a reaction.
Yeah. But we are moving past that today because the real history is gritty, it's investigative, and frankly, it's deeply dark. We are going to trace this product's entire trajectory.
From the very beginning.
From a wounded Civil War soldier looking for an escape from drug addiction, all the way through these waves of social panic and racial prejudice that shaped the modern formula.
And it goes right up to today, doesn't it?
It does, right up to its bizarre, highly regulated status in today's pharmaceutical supply chain. It's an incredible story.
So our mission in this deep dive is to trace that whole path, from its very first formula as a supposed cure to the chemical dangers it presented, and then the huge shifts that were driven by these legal and social crises.
And we're going to expose the incredible legal gymnastics that are required to keep that original core ingredient flowing into the United States even today.
It's a shortcut, really, to understanding one of the most complex but also hidden narratives in American commercial history.
And that entire journey is amazingly contained right there in the name. The original formula was explicitly about two specific ingredients.
Coca done cold.
Exactly. The first is the coca, which comes from the coca leach, the source of the cocaine alkaloid.
Okay.
And the second is the cola, from the cola nut, which provided a really potent dose of caffeine. These weren't just for flavor, they were the active ingredients in what was sold as a powerful medicine.
So there's no ambiguity. It was absolutely unequivocally designed to be a kick, a stimulant, something intended to alter your mental and physical state.
That's right. The early marketing was overt, it was medicinal. It claimed in very explicit terms that Coca-Cola alleviated headaches and acted specifically as brain and nerve tonic.
Catonic, not refreshment.
Not at all. It was sold initially as a patent medicine, right at a drugstore counter. It was touted as a cure for a whole range of ailments from that era, everything from indigestion and nerve disorders to headaches and, interestingly, impotence.
So the all-in-one fix.
The all-in-one fix for the nervous, overworked, and ailing American.
Okay, let's trace this back to the absolute beginning then. The inventor himself, Dr. John Stith Pemberton. This is where the tragedy starts.
It does, and it begins with trauma. Pemberton wasn't just a pharmacist. He was a former lieutenant colonel who served the Confederacy during the American Civil War.
And his military service, it didn't just end with the surrender. It ended for him in a very specific and devastating way.
It did, in April 1865 at the Battle of Columbus. That's where it happened.
One of the last big fights of the war. So what happened to him on that battlefield?
He sustained a severe, life-altering wound. He was slashed directly across the chest with a cavalry saber.
Wow. And in that environment, post-battle medicine, the options for treatment had to be incredibly limited.
They were. He was facing agonizing chronic pain. And the only truly effective, fast-acting pain relief available to him or to any doctor at that time was a very potent narcotic.
Morphine.
Precisely. Pemberton, like thousands and thousands of other Civil War veterans from both the North and the South, became cripplingly addicted to morphine.
This wasn't a choice.
It was a medical consequence. It was the only available treatment for that kind of sustained, severe battlefield injury. The scale of this problem was just immense. The addiction became so common among veterans it had a grim nickname.
Soldier's disease.
Soldier's disease. And you have to remember, he was a professional pharmacist. He knew chemistry. He knew medicine. So his primary motivation here had to be finding a solution to his own problem, right?
To this devastating soldier's disease.
That is the crucial context. Pemberton's original goal for this beverage, the one that would become Coca-Cola, was explicitly to find a safe cure, or at least a manageable substitute, for his own crippling morphine addiction.
So he was looking for a tonic that didn't have the stigma of opium, but could still tackle those other problems, the headaches, the nerve disorders.
Exactly. He wasn't just trying to start a business. He was trying to save himself.
It's incredible, though. His desire to escape addiction to one hard drug, morphine, led him directly to a formula centered on another hard drug, cocaine. That seems so counterintuitive to us today.
It does.
Did the medical community back then just see coca extract as less serious or less addictive?
They absolutely did, or at the very least, they saw it as a superior alternative to opium and morphine. It was considered a functional stimulant, not a narcotic depressant. And besides, Pemberton didn't invent this idea out of thin air.
Right, he was inspired by something else.
He was inspired by a globally famous, wildly successful European product. It was called Vin Mariani.
Ah, the French cocaine wine. This wasn't some fringe product, was it? It sounds like it was serious high society stuff.
Oh, it was revolutionary in its popularity and its prestige. Vin Mariani was created in Paris by a man named Angelo Mariani. It was basically a French Bordeaux wine that was just laced heavily with coca extract.
It was popular everywhere.
Across the continent, in the U.S., it was endorsed by artists, scientists, even royalty. But to give you the clearest idea of its prestige, the sources document that Pope Leo III was reported to regularly carry a flask of Vin Mariani.
The Pope?
The Pope himself. He apparently drank it to combat fatigue and help with his digestion, and he even awarded its creator a Vatican gold medal in gratitude.
That is just incredible context. So this wasn't some back alley brew. This was Vatican-approved, celebrity-endorsed, high-class medicine.
Exactly. It completely legitimizes Pemberton's decision to try and emulate it. It sets the stage for his own original product, which he logically called Pemberton's French wine, Coca.
He was just adapting a prestigious European cure for the American market.
That's all it was.
So if we strip away all the marketing, what was the actual chemical recipe for that initial pre-Coca-Cola drink?
It was a pretty straightforward combination of those powerful components. First, the essential ingredient, coca leaf extract, providing the cocaine.
Okay.
Second, the cola nut extract, which supplied that caffeine kick. And critically, it was all bound together with alcohol, the wine base. It was chemically and conceptually the American version of Vin Mariani.
And the sources point out a really dangerous chemical interaction here.
Yeah.
Between the alcohol and the cocaine, one that made this cure especially potent.
Yes, and this is where the chemistry gets really interesting and also profoundly tragic, given Pemberton's goal was to escape addiction.
Right.
When you ingest ethanol, the alcohol, and the wine and cocaine at the same time, the human liver metabolizes them together. And this process, it's called transesterification, creates a third distinct compound.
And that compound is called?
Cocaethylene.
Why is cocaethylene so much more dangerous than just cocaine on its own?
Well, cocaethylene is an active metabolite that is fundamentally more cardiotoxic than cocaine. It's more damaging to the heart. It's also known to intensify and prolong the euphoric effects of the drug.
So it hits harder and lasts longer.
And critically, it has a longer half-life in the body than cocaine does. Where cocaine is metabolized pretty quickly, cocaethylene just lingers.
So Pemberton's attempt to find a non-morphine cure for his addiction
Actually created a drink that was chemically designed to hit harder, last longer, and present a much higher risk of fatal cardiac toxicity. It was a powerfully addictive cardiotoxic elixir being sold as a cure.
That whole mix of severe pain, desperation, European prestige, and dangerous chemistry takes us right up to the critical moment, the pivot point that forced the formula to change.
Right.
And that pivot, it wasn't driven by some sudden realization about the dangers of cocaine or cocaethylene. It was driven by a change in local law.
That's the irony of it all. The first crisis had absolutely nothing to do with the hard drugs Pemberton was using. In 1886, Atlanta, Georgia, where he was based, enforced new prohibition laws.
Banning alcohol.
Exactly. They banned the manufacture and sale of alcohol. And since Pemberton's French wine Coca contained wine, it was automatically banned from sale overnight.
He had to pivot immediately, or his whole business was gone.
He was facing extinction, so his immediate remedy was decisive. He removed the alcohol base and replaced it with, well, copious amounts of sugar and carbonated water.
And that turned the medicinal wine tonic into a non-alcoholic syrup.
A syrup sold at soda fountain shops and advertised specifically as my temperance drink. This desperate, business-driven decision to survive the 1886 Atlanta Prohibition, that is the moment that truly marks the birth of Coca-Cola as a carbonated soft drink.
So for almost 2 decades then, from 1886 until the early 1900s, people were drinking this sugary, non-alcoholic carbonated soda that still had the coca leaf extract in it.
That's right. Which brings us to the second and far more consequential crisis, the full removal of the cocaine component itself. This largely happened starting around 1903.
And this is a critical date because this change was completely voluntary. It happened more than a decade before the federal government stepped in with the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act in 1914.
Exactly. The company chose to do this.
Okay, before we get into why they removed it, let's talk about the potency. Because there's this myth about people getting high off the early soda. What was the actual strength of the drug in the drink?
This is a really crucial distinction, and the sources debate it, mostly because the formula changed over the years. We have some historical accounts that suggest the earlier, more potent medicinal versions might have had significant amounts.
How significant?
Some estimates push toward 3.5 grams of cocaine in a highly concentrated dose.
3.5 grams. That is an enormous amount of cocaine.
It is, but it's important to understand that this would likely refer to the raw extract used to make the syrup, not the amount in the final drink that someone was served.
Ah, okay. That makes more sense.
When you look at the final product, the beverage in a glass at the soda fountain, another source gives a much more granular estimate. Only about 9 milligrams of cocaine per glass.
And 9 milligrams taken orally in an acidic carbonated liquid. What would that actually feel like?
In all likelihood, negligible, especially in terms of a recreational high. The rate of absorption for cocaine through the mouth is much slower and less efficient than other methods.
Right.
Plus, the acidic environment of the soda itself would likely start to break down the alkaloid, reducing its bioavailability even more. The expert consensus is that, especially in the formula after 1888 and leading up to 1903, the consumer probably wouldn't have been able to detect any typical euphoric effects at all.
Okay, so that creates a disconnect. If the amount of cocaine in the drink was already tiny, likely non-recreational and getting smaller over time, why did the company feel the need to remove it completely? If it wasn't a pharmacological problem, it had to be a social one.
Precisely. This is where the history stops being quirky trivia and becomes profoundly ugly. The change was not driven by pharmacology or by a general public health concern. It was driven by a potent, focused combination of moral panic and deep-seated racial prejudice, particularly in the Jim Crow South.
The sources are exceptionally clear about this. It was driven by a huge societal shift in who the drug was perceived to affect.
They are. Cocaine use radically shifted in the public imagination in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It stopped being seen as a legitimate medicinal tonic for, wealthy, white, urban users and high society.
People who are driving the Vin Mariani trend.
Exactly. Instead, it became demonized. It was seen as a practice exclusively associated with marginalized groups.
And the specific figure that was used to drive that demonization was the Negro cocaine fiend.
That phrase, or similar rhetoric, was weaponized across the South. In the context of Jim Crow and post-Reconstruction, Southern politicians, law enforcement, and especially newspapers actively promoted this terrifying and completely baseless myth.
And what was the myth?
They claimed that cocaine made black men insane, violently aggressive, and crucially impervious to pain or even police bullets, which required officers to upgrade their weapons.
That sounds like a justification. Police fabricating a reason for increased force and for controlling black communities.
That's exactly what the historical analysis suggests. These narratives often specifically targeted and amplified fears, stating that the terrifying consequence of cocaine use was that it caused black men to become violent predators.
And they often cited baseless fears of them raping white women.
Exactly. This just fueled profound social hysteria in a region that was already gripped by racial paranoia and deeply institutionalized white control.
So this makes the early drug prohibition laws and the removal of cocaine from Coke look less like public health policy and more like a tool of social and racial control.
That's the dark truth of it. Early drug control policy in the U.S., especially around substances like opium and cocaine, was heavily intertwined with efforts to control and marginalize non-white groups, Chinese immigrants with opium and Black Americans with cocaine.
So this moral panic was manufactured.
It was manufactured and inflated by police and media narratives, blaming the drug for everything from urban crime to social disorder. It created the political climate needed for regulation and, eventually, outright prohibition.
And the company owner at the time, Asa Candler, he saw this as an existential threat to his brand in the South and just capitulated to these white fears.
He had no choice, really, given the intense social and political climate. The sources state that Candler bowed to these intense, racially charged fears. He decided that even the tiny, non-functional trace of the coca alkaloid had to be removed to protect the brand's image.
Coca-Cola just couldn't afford to be associated, even peripherally, with the demonized image of the Negro cocaine fiend.
Exactly.
So what did he use as a substitute? He still needed that signature kick.
Right. To maintain that stimulating kick that customers were used to, that feeling of invigoration that made it different from just flavored sugar water, he doubled down on the two remaining stimulants.
More sugar and more caffeine.
He added more sugar for that immediate energy rush, and he significantly increased the amount of caffeine. The process wasn't instant. They slowly reduced the trace amounts until it was completely gone by around 1929. But the decisive action to eliminate the cocaine alkaloid was taken in the early 1900s.
That realization that Coca-Cola's current formula, with its high levels of sugar and caffeine, is a direct result of a century-old racial panic and targeted white hysteria that is absolutely profound.
It is. It fundamentally alters how you see the product's transformation from medicine to soda.
It creates a direct, undeniable link between the origins of the American drug war and the final formula of a staple consumer product.
The manufactured narrative of the Negro cocaine fiend provided the societal leverage needed to remove the ingredient, even though, ironically, it was wealthy whites who were the primary medicinal users in the first place.
Okay, so fast forwarding past the cocaine crisis, the company has its new formula, primarily sugar and caffeine, but the regulatory fights were far from over.
Not at all.
In 1916, the company is fighting the federal government again, but not over cocaine. This time, it's over the other stimulant, caffeine.
This is a fascinating chapter in legal and food safety history. It's the Supreme Court case known as United States v. 40 barrels and 20 kegs of Coca-Cola.
40 barrels and 20 kegs. It sounds like a pirate story.
It does, doesn't it? The government's core argument in that lawsuit, which was brought under the 1906 Food and Drugs Act, was twofold. They alleged both misbranding and adulteration.
Okay, so what was the misbranding charge?
First, they argued the product was misbranded because the name Coca-Cola promised the presence of coca and cola extracts. But by then, the product contained no coca and little, if any, cola, meaning the name itself was deceptive.
They were saying the name was basically a historical lie because the ingredients that gave the drink its original properties were gone.
Exactly. But the second and legally more crucial charge was adulteration. The government argued that the caffeine, which was originally from cola nuts but was now often added in a purified form, was an added poisonous or deleterious ingredient that might make the drink injurious to health.
So here's a company that just spent over a decade getting rid of a Schedule II narcotic because of social pressure, only to turn around and have to defend the safety of caffeine in the Supreme Court.
The irony is rich. The core of the legal argument really hinged on the definition of adulteration, and specifically what counted as an added ingredient.
What was Coke's argument?
Their lawyers argued that since caffeine was part of the original formula derived from the cola nut, it couldn't be legally considered an added ingredient in the way the law meant. They tried to use the historical nature of the formula as a shield.
And what does the Supreme Court say to that?
Justice Hughes, who wrote the opinion, firmly rejected the company's position. The court said that accepting Coca-Cola's definition would lead to absurdity and completely undermine consumer safety laws.
He gave an analogy, didn't he?
A very powerful one. Hughes said that manufacturers would be free to put arsenic or strychnine into a compound, give it a distinctive name, and then claim immunity simply because the poison was part of the original formula.
That's a powerful defense of the law's intent.
Yeah.
They weren't going to let a historical name be used as a loophole.
Correct. The court determined that added ingredient just meant ingredients that were artificially introduced. Now, the statute only banned the ingredient if it was poisonous and might render the article injurious to health.
So they still had to prove it was actually dangerous.
Right, and because there was a decided conflict of competent evidence about the actual injurious effect of the caffeine, meaning doctors and scientists disagreed sharply, the ultimate safety question had to be submitted to a jury.
So the case didn't ban caffeine, but it forced the company's hand.
It did. The jury trial forced Coca-Cola to aggressively defend the safety of caffeine. Ultimately, the company entered into an agreement with the government to significantly reduce the amount of caffeine in the syrup, ensuring it was deemed safe for general consumption.
So this whole saga prohibition, then racial panic, then the caffeine fight, that's what truly cemented the final formula we know today.
It is. It's a complex chain of historical necessity. But even though the drug itself was gone, the legacy of the coca leaf itself did not end.
Which brings us to the most incredible, almost unbelievable part of this deep dive, the modern supply chain.
This is where the 1886 medicinal tonic connects directly to the highly regulated world of pharmaceuticals today. And here is the single fact that surprises everyone. Coca-Cola still imports coca leaves for flavoring purposes.
Wait, say that again. They still use the literal coca plant, the physical leaf, in the production process today.
I absolutely do. The leaf extract is considered necessary to maintain that complex signature flavor profile.
But surely there's no cocaine in it today.
Well, actually, it's complicated. The scale of the importation is not insignificant. We have data confirming that approximately 100 metric tons of dried coca leaf are imported into the U.S. each year. Another source from 2003 specified that this was more than 385,000 pounds of coca leaf annually.
That is a staggering quantity of a Schedule II plant coming into the country just for flavor. Where do these leaves come from?
They come primarily from South America, from countries like Peru, often through entities like the National Coca Company. But once they're imported, they don't go to Coca-Cola's bottling plants. They have to pass through a single, specialized processor.
A processor that holds a government-sanctioned monopoly on the whole thing.
Precisely. And that processor is the Stepan Company, located in Maywood, New Jersey.
So they have a factory in New Jersey that processes all of this.
That's the facility. It used to be Maywood Chemical Works, which Stepan bought in 1959. And what's crucial here is its unique legal status. Stepan is the only commercial entity in the entire United States explicitly authorized by the DEA to import and process coca leaves.
So the U.S. government essentially created a legal protective monopoly, specifically to service Coca-Cola's need for a flavoring agent.
That arrangement is a textbook case of regulatory cronyism, an outgrowth of the Harrison Act regulations. The government granted this specific license to this factory, in part, to control the manufacturing process and prevent the high-value cocaine alkaloid from being processed in foreign countries.
So Stepan was given permission to import the leaves, safely extract the drug, and then create the non-narcotic flavoring agent.
That's the dual process. Stepan takes the raw leaves, extracts the cocaine, and then separates the two resulting products. The first is the cocaine-free flavoring extract that goes to the Coca-Cola Company,
Which they famously nicknamed merchandise #5.
Correct, that's the flavor component. But the second product, the actual cocaine alkaloid that has been extracted and purified, is not destroyed. It's diverted and sold to a large pharmaceutical firm for legitimate medicinal purposes.
So they extract the drug for medicine and use the spent leaves for flavor. The plant is still in the bottle.
In a way, yes. And the recipient of this legally extracted pharmaceutical-grade cocaine, that company is Mallinckrodt, a large multinational pharmaceutical firm.
So the flavor of the world's most popular soft drink and the modern medical cocaine supply chain are literally two sides of the same coca leaf, separated in a New Jersey factory.
That is the enduring, bizarre loop of this history. Mallinckrodt receives the extracted cocaine and purifies it further to produce cocaine hydrochloride USP-CII, which is then used as a highly regulated raw material for compounded medications. The Stepan Company processes the flavor for Coca-Cola and simultaneously feeds the entire U.S. medical market with pharmaceutical-grade cocaine.
The fact that Mallinckrodt is the recipient here adds another layer of darkness, given their business practices in other areas.
It absolutely contextualizes this history within modern controversies. Mallinckrodt has been heavily implicated in major national health crises, most notably the opioid epidemic.
They were identified as one of the primary companies distributing vast quantities of opioid pills.
Vast quantities. Their subsidiary, SpecChex, supplied nearly 29 billion oxycodone pills between 2006 and 2012.
29 billion, that number is staggering.
It equates to more than 80 opioid pills for every single person in the country. This led to them facing massive lawsuits from nearly every state and eventually resulted in multiple complex bankruptcy filings as they tried to settle the liability.
And they were also central to the controversy over the drug Acthar gel, which involved astronomical price hikes.
Yes. This demonstrates their monopolistic leverage. Mallinckrodt acquired the company that owned the rights to Acthar, And after the acquisition, they just dramatically raised the price.
By how much?
The price went from about $40 a vial in 2001 to over $34,000 a vial in 2014. That's an 85,000% increase.
85,000%.
They were later sued by the FTC and multiple state attorneys general for anti-competitive behavior and monopolistic pricing.
The fact that this specific company, so deeply embedded in the opioid crisis and drug pricing controversies, is the one that refines the medical cocaine sourced from the very same lees used for your soda.
Right.
It truly closes the loop.
It creates a direct, unbroken line from Pemberton's self-medicating cure in 1886 to the structure of modern drug control and distribution. The plant ingredient, or at least the spent part of it, remains tethered to one of the largest corporations in the world, while the extracted drug goes through one of the most controversial.
Okay, let's pivot fully to the cocaine that Mallinckrodt produces. What is its legitimate medical purpose today? Why is it still a Schedule II substance?
Cocaine hydrochloride nasal solution is an FDA-approved, Schedule II controlled substance. Its modern use is highly specialized and localized. It's used clinically as a topical anesthetic, it numbs the surface, and critically as a potent vasoconstrictor and decongestant.
Vasoconstriction meaning it causes blood vessels to narrow. Why is that specific property so valuable in a medical setting?
That combination of numbing and narrowing blood vessels is particularly valuable in specific surgeries, especially those in highly vascularized areas like the nasal, oral, and laryngeal cavities.
Like a septoplasty or sinus surgery.
Exactly. The drug's powerful ability to constrict the nasal blood vessels helps dramatically minimize bleeding during the operation. This not only reduces blood loss for the patient, but for the surgeon, provides a much clearer surgical field.
So it does two essential things at once.
Yeah.
It anesthetizes the area and actively controls the bleeding.
That dual mechanism is what sets it apart. It works through two distinct chemical pathways. First, the anesthetic effect, which is similar to other local anesthetics, works by blocking voltage-gated sodium channels in the nerve membranes. This prevents nerve impulses from firing, which leads to numbness.
And the second pathway, the vasoconstriction, is its signature effect. How does it do that?
This is where the sympathetic nervous system comes in. Cocaine exerts strong sympathomimetic effects. It mimics the fight-or-flight response. It does this by inhibiting the reuptake of noradrenaline into the presynaptic nerve terminals.
So by blocking the reuptake pump.
Exactly. It causes a buildup of high concentrations of catecholamines, noradrenaline, epinephrine, and dopamine in the synapse. This flood of chemicals then activates the adrenergic receptors on the surrounding tissue, causing the blood vessels to immediately narrow and contract. That's the vasoconstriction.
That perfectly explains the physiological kick from the early soda. But even in a clinical setting, that psychoactive element must still pose a serious risk.
It absolutely does, which is why its use is so strictly monitored. That core mechanism, the massive stimulation of dopamine reuptake, is what gives it its potent addictive potential. Clinicians have to monitor its use closely because of the potential for serious cardiovascular toxicities.
What are the main adverse effects they watch for?
The primary ones are cardiovascular. Severe tachycardia, which is a rapid heart rate, potentially life-threatening hypertension or high blood pressure, and the potent vasoconstriction of coronary arteries, which can lead to a heart attack.
So given those serious and potentially fatal risks, is topical cocaine still the first-line choice for these nasal procedures? Or have alternatives emerged?
It is no longer universally the first choice. Current clinical literature shows that alternatives are often preferred because they have a much lower systemic risk profile. For instance, studies have extensively compared topical cocaine to solutions like xylometazoline lidocaine and tetracaine.
And what did those studies show?
They often find that the alternatives provide comparable or sometimes even superior efficacy in terms of anesthesia. Some trials found that patients given tetracaine experienced significantly less pain compared to those given cocaine. While cocaine offers that uniquely strong decongestant effect, many clinical guidelines now suggest that the alternative should be preferred, or at least considered first.
So it's still a valuable tool, but safer substitutes exist and are increasingly favored. It's really been relegated from a cure-all tonic to a niche, highly controlled surgical option.
A Schedule II substance used for precise, localized medical purposes, completely divorced from the context of a century ago. It exists only within the most rigorous medical boundaries.
This has been a genuinely shocking journey. Let's just summarize the incredible trajectory we've traced.
We started with Lieutenant Colonel John Stith Pemberton trying to cure a crippling morphine addiction from a horrific Civil War wound. His solution was modeled after Vin Mariani, the high society Vatican-approved coca wine.
which created that dangerous cardiotoxic compound, cocaine, in the body. The first pivot came when Prohibition in Atlanta forced him to strip out the alcohol in 1886, accidentally turning his medicinal wine into a carbonated syrup. Coke's true birth.
The second most consequential pivot was removing the drug component around 1903, and that was driven not by health concerns, but by a horrific racialized moral panic that weaponized the myth of the Negro cocaine fiend.
Forcing the company to substitute the drug's kick with extra sugar and caffeine. And despite all of that, the core coca plant ingredient is still in the product today, fueling this completely legal, highly regulated pharmaceutical supply chain.
The Stepan Company extracts the cocaine for the medical giant Mallinckrodt, a firm notorious for its role in the opioid crisis, before supplying the spent cocaine-free leaves to Coca-Cola for flavor. The result is this enduring legal connection between the world's most popular soft drink and the complex, often sinister history of American drug control.
It is an incredible loop.
Yeah.
It absolutely mandates that you look at that soda can entirely differently the next time you see one.
It does. It's crazy to think about. I want to know what you guys think. Drop a comment below. If they released the original 1886 formula today as a prescription, would people actually use it? Let us know.
I think we all know the answer to that. Given our modern fascination with stimulants, focus enhancers, quick fixes, it's a genuinely challenging question.
What does that full circle say about our modern relationship with pharmaceuticals, stimulants, and the pursuit of optimizing our own health? Have we truly moved past the era of the patent medicine, or have we just replaced the soda fountain with a more sophisticated pharmacy counter?
Something to think about. Thanks for listening to Declassified Diagnosis. If you want to listen to more dark stories right now, click on the video to your right. To subscribe and catch the story we have for you tomorrow, click the button on your left. We'll see you there.